In order to break off the engagement with the Prince of Beijing, my sister offered me 10 million to turn him gay. Damn it, I hate people who wear Buddhist beads to show off. This straight killer flirted with the girl overtly and covertly for 2 months and finally got her. He took the money and ran away without any regrets. The cold and noble prince went mad. He personally grabbed me back, took off his tie and tied my hands. Since you have deceived me, you must pay the price. I rudely broke the Buddhist beads on his wrist and said, "Come on, don't you think I'm afraid of you?" Under the dim lights of the bar, I jumped and shouted, twisting my whole body like a big knot. I wanted to hook up with a muscular guy to chat and kill time, but ended up attracting my cheap sister Rachel. "Andrew, get the hell out of here." She was wearing a Chanel suit from the latest season, with her flaming red lips making her look deadly. Her aura as a strong woman was totally out of tune with the decadent atmosphere. I jumped even harder. "What did you say? Speak louder. I can't hear you." Rachel mercilessly grabbed my ear and half-dragged me out the door. "Alias, scheming Big Mother Zero, I need your help with something." She took off her sunglasses, and a hint of shrewd calculation unique to a businessman flashed in her upturned phoenix eyes. Turning my fiancé Richard gay and ruining my engagement with him. I rubbed my red earlobes, with obvious resentment in my tone. "Sister, I am just an unknown illegitimate child and have no intention of participating in any family struggles." Rachel opened her phone and said, "This is a photo of Richard." I raised my eyelids casually, took a single glance and couldn't look away. He has broad shoulders like the Pacific Ocean, a narrow waist outlined by a dark gray suit, a healthy wheat-colored skin, and deep eyes that are like a whirlpool that sucks you in. Gudong. I swallowed. It's absolutely amazing. Isn't this the peerless and fierce one that I have been dreaming of? Rachel winked at me and said, 10 million to take him down. My heart was shocked. Deal. Dating with such a great man and making 10 million? This is simply pie in the sky. This straight man killer is bound to break him into pieces. I rubbed my hands and said, "Can I ask why you want to cancel the engagement?" Rachel frowned and said, "This guy wears a string of Buddhist beads on his wrist, and he keeps twirling them around every day, no matter what. Damn it, I hate people who pretend to be cool." That evening, I was sent to Richard's home as a Buddhist lecturer. Few people know that Prince Richard, who is decisive and ruthless in the business world, is obsessed with Buddhism and even built an ancestral temple next to his villa. As soon as Richard finished his work and stepped into the ancestral hall, he saw me kneeling on a cushion in a moon-white robe, my slender back straight, looking up at the profile of the Buddha statue seriously and piously. Maybe he was impressed by my handsome outfit. He stared at me for at least 5 minutes and said in a hoarse voice, "Your name is Andrew? Rachel's brother?" I nodded slightly. "Yes, I have been studying Buddhism since I was young. From now on, I will explain the Buddhist scriptures to Richard. You can call me Andrew." "Andrew." Richard sneered, clearly not taking me seriously. "Given my relationship with Rachel, you should call me brother-in-law. Why don't we just talk about our own affairs?" This. God, to each his own. Time is precious. Let's start the class as soon as possible. I was afraid of displeasing this gentleman, so I skipped the address and went straight to the point. Today we will first study the first chapter of the Heart Sutra, the true meaning of Ma. Richard stroked the Buddhist beads on his wrist, smiling. "Please go ahead." He knew I was Rachel's but didn't stop me from approaching. He probably wanted to see me make a fool of myself and leave if I couldn't pretend anymore. But 20 minutes later, the look in his eyes when he looked at me changed from disbelief to astonishment. It's just because I talked eloquently, from the shallow to the deep, from the origin of Buddhism to idealism. Finally, I took a sip of tea slowly. "Do you understand, Richard?" Richard was petrified for a moment, then he filled my teacup himself, speaking with a hint of respect. "Andrew is more knowledgeable than I thought." What a joke. I came prepared. "Well," I waved my hand, "what I just said was just an appetizer." Richard raised his handsome eyebrows slightly. The Buddha said, "The 4 elements are empty, So if you want to understand the subtlety of Buddhism, the first thing you have to do is dash. I uttered 3 words quietly: avoid women. Under Richard's puzzled gaze, I took out dozens of posters I had prepared. Beautiful queen, big-eyed lowly, gentle jade. Looking around, there are beauties of all types. I pointed to one of them and asked, "Does it look good?" "Good. Very good," I deadpanned. "From now on, don't even look at these." For the next 2 hours, I showed Richard the dangers of lusting after beauty and the drawbacks of love in a 360-degree, all-round way. Specifically, it is the disadvantages of falling in love with a woman. Why was Tang Sing able to obtain the true scriptures? Because he rejected the queen of the kingdom of women. Why was Sun Wukong able to become the fighting Buddha? Because he defeated the white-bone demon 3 times. What about Zhu Beiji? It's obvious that no woman is interested in him. Richard held his chin and thought, "I understand, but I have a question." "Explain." "I invited you here to talk about Buddhist scriptures, not to argue." He raised his eyelids and looked over. The warm yellow light shone on his face, making him look stunningly handsome. I calmed my pounding heart and explained seriously, abstaining from sex with women is a necessary step to becoming a Buddha. He sighed, "I'll have the driver take you home, Andrew." The last 2 words were ground between his teeth, seeming to take on several different meanings. For half a month, under the guise of explaining the Heart Sutra and the Diamond Sutra, I frantically instilled in Richard the idea of staying away from women. Daily question: what is our slogan? Richard said very wisely, "A wise man does not fall in love, I am a saint all the way." Without women in your heart, Buddhism will naturally become divine. I nodded with satisfaction. Very good. During this time, Rachel couldn't wait and sent a message to urge the progress. "Andrew, can you do this? It's been so long and you two haven't made any substantial progress. Do you still want the 10 million? Why rush?" I replied calmly, "After all, men don't become gay overnight. It takes time." His thoughts were almost transformed, so I tried to add physical contact to test Richard's tolerance for same-sex intimate behavior. For example, when he was copying Buddhist scriptures, he slowly leaned his upper body over, and the 2 people were very close. We could hear each other's breathing, but I remained expressionless. I copied the wrong line here. "Focus, Richard." Richard lowered his head and said, then silently moved to the side, trying to keep some distance. The sunlight filtered in through the blinds, casting a layer of gold on his profile, making his features more distinct. I smiled and held his shoulders. "I can't see what you wrote if you're too far away." Richard obeyed and stopped moving. "You don't know until you press it. Once you press it, you'll be shocked." It turns out that he looks thin when he is dressed, but has muscular figure when he is undressed, and his biceps feel amazing. He was wearing a black t-shirt today. As he wrote, the muscles in his wheat-colored forearms tightened, and his lines were smooth and full of power and beauty. I couldn't help but pinched it twice. Richard looked up in confusion. "Ahem," I said with concern. "Are you tired from writing? Let me massage your shoulders." Richard chuckled softly, and his eyes suddenly became intriguing. I suddenly felt guilty and withdrew my hand awkwardly. "Andrew, why are you so scared? This is a hunk worth 10 million. 2 minutes later, I fanned myself with one hand and complained, "This weather is too hot." Richard's nostrils twitched and a trace of discomfort appeared on his face. "You put on perfume?" "No," I shook my head, confused. "It's probably the smell of laundry detergent. It seems that the man-attracting perfume I bought at a high price is working. It smells nice." Richard paused while writing and his ears turned red. "Hey little brat, I'll charm you to death." "Thank you," I said, putting on a serious face, "but I hope you can focus more on studying Buddhism." "Oh." His voice was muffled. After a short silence, Richard asked again, "Andrew, are we too close?" I acted as if nothing had happened. "We are both men. Are you afraid of what I might do to you?" Unexpectedly, the next second Richard suddenly turned around and stared at me with his deep eyes. "Why can't they be men?" I was caught off guard and was stunned for a moment. The good voice of the subwoofer sounded close to my ear. You keep telling me to stay away from women, doesn't that just prove that men can do it? I didn't realize Richard is such a logical genius. His eyes were persistent and fervent, like a net that bound me tightly. During the few seconds of staring at each other, I actually had the illusion that I was the prey. Of course not. The air around me gradually heated up, and I stood up suddenly and took several steps back. Look how scared you are. Richard arched his eyebrows and couldn't help laughing. I was just kidding. You're the best kid. I coughed twice and decided to back out. Let's stop here for today. No, Richard pointed to the scroll with Sanskrit printed on it. I don't know how to write this word. That was a unique handed-down copy that he had collected at great expense. Because it was too old and contained traditional Chinese characters, some of the characters were indeed difficult to recognize. I glanced at it and gestured in the air. This word is like this. Can't read. Richard held the pen in front of me and asked for advice. Just hold my hand and write. Is there such a good thing? I moved closer, half in surprise and half in caution, and held his hand, trying to ignore my unconsciously quickened breathing, and finished writing stroke by stroke. Have you learned it? Richard, however, stared at the word I wrote, with a meaningful smile on his lips, which made me feel uneasy. Andrew's handwriting looks familiar. My heart skipped a beat and I suddenly let go of his hand. The tip of the pen hit the white paper, leaving a long mark. Really? I usually love to copy calligraphy, so I might have imitated some of the styles of famous calligraphers. Richard picked up the pen and continued writing. Someone wrote me a love letter before, and it was in the same handwriting. His voice was so light, but when it fell into my ears, alarm bells immediately rang. It's just a coincidence, I said with a forced smile. So Richard and I are quite destined to meet. Maybe. Richard sighed, his tone melancholy. I touched my nose, and a sense of crisis suddenly arose in my heart. Tomorrow, I have something to do, so I'll take a day off. You can review the Heart Sutra by yourself. Richard raised his eyebrows in surprise. Why? Does my closeness bother you? Then she sighed, her tone drawn out and tinged with a coquettish tone. Don't go, isn't it enough for me to apologize to you? When I realized he had misunderstood, I couldn't help but laugh. Tomorrow is my mother's death anniversary, I have to go to the grave. Okay, Richard thought for a moment, then I'll go with you. This is my mom. What are you doing? Richard said as a matter of course, you are my teacher, so your mother is my ancestor. Isn't it my duty to go and pay my respects to her? That seems to be the case. He was smug. I was right, wasn't I? I took the opportunity to take advantage of him. Once a teacher, always a father. Call me Dad first. Fuck Andrew, I call you Uncle. If you want, it's possible. Richard finally followed. He personally drove me to the suburbs. The prince, who was said to be aloof and noble, chattered non-stop along the way, like a chatterbox who hadn't spoken for hundreds of years. Andrew, you have a sullen face so early in the morning. Do you hate me so much? I didn't answer, staring at the black and white photo on the tombstone in a daze. The gentle-looking woman had a stern face and looked at me expressionlessly. Richard's complaint stuck in his throat, and he handed over a thick stack of papers like offering a treasure. I brought all the Buddhist scriptures I copied these days. Burn them for Aunt. It should help to save her soul. Need not. I glanced at it and didn't answer. Richard frowned unhappily. You don't like what I wrote? I gave a sarcastic smile. She doesn't deserve it. I hope she is in hell and has no chance of rebirth. Meeting his surprised gaze, I smiled lightly and said, Richard, our mother-son relationship is not that good. On the contrary, before my mother passed away, she and I were like water and fire. Richard's hand holding the Buddhist scripture trembled violently, but he stabilized it in time. How is that possible? You clearly… Ming what? Nothing. He turned his face away slightly, his voice becoming dull. Am I dazzled? The corners of Richard's eyes seemed to be a little red. On the way back, the air pressure in the carriage was low. Richard hesitated for a long time and asked tentatively, Andrew, Can you tell me about your family? You are so interested in me, Mr. Liu has a crush on me? I glanced at him nonchalantly and said with a smile, but I have to think carefully about teacher-student love. Richard tilted his head and smiled, meeting my teasing gaze without hesitation. After all the brainwashing you've done to me these days, I'm not attracted to female creatures, and you're the only man around me. So, Andrew, can you give me a chance to get to know you? His tone was calm and his attitude was straightforward and upright. My heart skipped a beat. I could see that Richard was interested in me, but it wasn't enough. Given our current level of intimacy, there is no way he would cancel the engagement for me and the eldest daughter of the Gu family. In a flash, I realized that this was a good opportunity to get closer to him. Then I slowly turned my head to the side, leaving him with a melancholy profile, and exhaled the foul air that had been pent up for a long time. My orientation, you should be able to tell, right? Richard winked at me. Are you admitting that you flirted with me earlier? My mother doesn't support me. She has always wanted me to become a normal man. The scenery outside the car window quickly receded, and my memory went back to that sultry summer. In my senior year of high school, the news that I was in love with a boy reached the ears of this old-fashioned woman. She locked me up like crazy, slapped me, and screamed in my ear. How could I give birth to such a lowly creature like you? The Gu family would never give their fortune to a homosexual. Your father must not know, absolutely not. I refused to give in, so she came up with a dirty trick. They put drugs in my water and spent $200 to hire a lady to try to perform physical corrections. I struggled to drive the person away. Under the severe torture from the other party, I was sweating all over and almost fainted. Then what? Richard stopped by the roadside, looking serious. Then this crazy woman slashed my face with a fruit knife, under the pretext of making it so that I could no longer seduce men. Hold! Richard raised his elbow high and slammed it hard on the steering wheel, cursing under his breath. It's all over. I patted his shoulder and said, evildoers will be punished by God. She was diagnosed with cancer last year and died not long after. Plastic surgery technology is very advanced these days, and removing scars is easy. I put my face close to Richard's. Look, my skin is still as smooth as before. Richard's expression suddenly became unnatural. He pushed me away and said unhappily, why are you getting so close to me when you can just talk? The Prince of Beijing Circle is actually still an innocent boy? Sorry. I shrugged innocently. Well, Richard, considering my bumpy road in relationships, please do me a favor and accompany me to my dad's 50th birthday the day after tomorrow? Richard was stunned. Your dad's birthday? Is it the day after tomorrow? My sister should have invited you, my nominal brother-in-law. Richard thought for a moment and said, it seems to be the case. Very good, I nodded. Reject her? Ah. I followed suit. Come with me. Richard's handsome face was dazed for a moment before he finally reacted. You asked me to accompany you to pay tribute to your aunt, expecting that I would sympathize with your situation and take the opportunity to make a request? Fuck, Andrew, you're really too scheming, aren't you? I looked at him leisurely. So, do you agree? Richard sighed in mock distress. Now that we've come to this point, I don't think I have any reason to refuse. But one step closer to 10 million. But if I go with you, what identity should I use? As if he had finally caught me, Richard smiled like a fox. I heard that you once publicly came out and angered your father. What would other people think when they saw us? He coughed twice, which was very suggestive. Of course, we are master and apprentice. Richard suddenly became like a frosted eggplant, wilted. He angrily said, it depends on my mood, and refused to pay any attention to me anymore. After spending some time with him, you will find that although Richard has a bad reputation, he actually has a decent temper and a sharp tongue but a soft heart. The day after tomorrow evening, I arrived at Richard's house with my carefully selected suit. Wear this one. Black suits your skin tone better. He looked me up and down, and his eyes suddenly lit up. You wear white and I wear black, the styles are exactly the same. Maybe they are couple outfits? I didn't expect Andrew to be so playful. I raised my eyebrows slightly but didn't deny it. See if you dare. Richard took the clothes and a muffled laugh escaped from his throat. There is nothing I dare not do. As expected, the moment Richard and I appeared in the same frame that night, it caused quite a stir in the entire audience. While Richard was being dragged away by an acquaintance to reminisce about the past, my two brothers raised their wine glasses and condescendingly toasted me. Our little brother is really amazing. He lost his inheritance rights after coming out as gay 3 years ago. Now he must be short of money, but he actually tried to hook up with Richard's prince. Isn't it disgusting that men like men? Ryan's volume was neither too high nor too low, just enough for people around him to hear clearly. Jason echoed him. Just like his mother, he is a shameless person. The illegitimate child only knows how to use such despicable means. He even dared to touch my future brother-in-law. He has lost all face. There were whispers coming from all around, all calling me disgusting, shameless, embarrassing, etc. There are many people in the upper class who like the same sex, but they are very proud and tacitly believe that publicly announcing their sexual orientation will bring shame to the entire family. The bad voices in this world, if you hear them too much, won't cause much of a stir. Following the principle of less trouble is worse than more, I lowered my eyes and said nothing, allowing them to ridicule me. I heard dogs barking from a distance away, and I was wondering who they were, and it turned out to be these two idiots. The thump-thump sound of high heels hitting the floor was getting closer, and I saw Rachel holding me behind her in a protective posture. Why, there's so much food at the banquet and you can't stop talking, you have to bark a few times to show your presence. After arguing with others, Rachel quietly patted my forearm and said in a voice that only the two of us could hear, "Not bad, you've put on your couple outfits, work harder and try to sleep with her soon." Sister, Ryan and Jason's arrogance was mostly gone. We three were born from the same womb. What's the point of you siding with outsiders? Rachel smiled coldly. Ever since you stole my password and tampered with my college entrance examination application when I was 18, there has been no relationship between us. Jason was obviously feeling guilty, and he stammered, unable to utter a word to refute. Ryan's ugly slanted eyes rolled around, and he suddenly raised his voice and walked towards the center of the hall. "Dad, Andrew came back specially to celebrate your birthday. You can't just focus on entertaining other guests, you should also look at his filial piety." My biological father Adams narrowed his eyes at me for a moment and said, "Who asked you to come?" As early as 3 years ago, Adams could not tolerate the shame of an illegitimate child and unilaterally severed ties with me. He even vetoed my inheritance rights, even though I didn't want it anyway. I raised my eyes and smiled heartlessly. "I'm here to wish Dad a happy birthday." "Don't call me Dad. You have nothing to do with me anymore. Get out. Get out." "Dad." Rachel took a few steps forward, looking anxious. "What era is it now? Freedom of love also means freedom of gender." Adams's forehead was throbbing with veins. "Shut up. If you say another word, get out with him." "Well," I waved my hand nonchalantly, "I'll just leave. It's such a happy day, it would be bad if I get upset." When I turned around, I was met with a pair of dark eyes. It was Richard, who had been watching for who knows how long. I spread my hands towards him. I wanted to ease the relationship between father and son, but failed. Alas, when a person is lonely for a long time, he will always yearn for family affection. "You guys continue, I'm going to go first." I suddenly remembered that I haven't prepared the lesson yet. "Okay, let's go back to class." Richard's dry and warm palms slowly reached out to hold my hand, and it seemed as if an endless amount of energy was being transmitted to me. He gave Adams a distant smile. "Goodbye." Adams was stunned. "Richard, please stop." I let him go. "It's none of your business." "I'm sorry, Andrew is my Buddhist teacher and also my friend." Richard lifted his eyelids and looked around. His eyes were stern and his smooth jawline was cold and hard. "He is someone I, Richard, am protecting. Please know this." Given Richard's power and position, no one dared to speak out when he openly protected someone. In full view of everyone, he took my hand and we walked out of the banquet hall one after the other. The guests were stunned. My dad was so angry that he nearly coughed out his lungs. Ryan and Jason were gritting their teeth at my back. Only Rachel was out of place. She gave me a cheering gesture. Richard was driving very fast. He grabbed my wrist tightly and took me to Richard's ancestral hall. I asked bitterly, "Do we really have to teach? I really haven't prepared for the lesson, so I can't give a lecture." "Fuck off." Richard interrupted me angrily. "Andrew, they insult you with such ugly words, you won't resist?" His anger was so fierce that I felt quite amused and helpless. That's normal. This society needs to improve its tolerance for homosexuality. What happened tonight is considered mild. If it happened 7 years ago in high school? There was a hint of inquiry in Richard's eyes. "What high school? Why don't you continue?" I looked away, laughed, and changed the subject. Adams is very face-conscious. He invited a lot of media to his birthday party. It would be terrible if we were photographed. I have already thought of the headlines for tomorrow's entertainment news. The Prince of the Beijing Circle is suspected of coming out, and the target is his fiancé's younger brother. Is this the extinction of humanity or the decline of morality? I don't care. Richard didn't laugh. He stared into my eyes without blinking. I care more about your attitude than the rumors outside. It was late at night, in the deserted ancestral hall. A silent throbbing spread and fermented between him and me. Those forbidden emotions buried underground are now emerging. 7. I felt a little uncomfortable. After a while, I touched my nose and said, "I do have feelings for you, but you and my sister are engaged, and we can't do anything to let her down." Richard's lips curled slightly, and his tone was meaningful. I did feel sorry for someone, but that person was not Rachel. The pair of eyes as deep as an ancient well stared at me. "Andrew, do you want to know who he is?" My breathing suddenly became rapid. After I managed to steady myself, I took a deep breath and raised my lips to smile ambiguously. "Who is he? Is it more important than us being together?" The situation is critical. It's time to use a big move to end this game of disguise. Richard's hands hanging by his side trembled violently. "What did you say?" The gloom on Zhang Jun's face was swept away, and then he couldn't help but exclaimed, "You want to stay with me?" He looked so high-spirited that he didn't look like a powerful prince, but more like a young man who had never been in love. "Yes." I blinked artificially. This is my attitude. Infected by him, a little joy also appeared between my brows. "Of course, the prerequisite is that you cancel the engagement first, Before she could finish, Richard kissed her regardless. "Don't worry, I'll exercise my boyfriend's rights first. I've learned something new. Is this what adult love is?" While I was catching my breath, I took the time to remind him. "This is a temple, the Buddha is watching." "Fuck, are you a dog? Don't bite there." Richard's smile was wanton and wicked. "It's more exciting, isn't it? I take back what I said about you being an innocent boy. The Buddha said, 'The 4 elements are empty.'" I recited Buddhist scriptures intermittently, trying to awaken his lost humanity. "Fuck you. Every time you come close, I have to use up a lot of endurance to not kiss you." The next second, my body was suddenly suspended in the air, and Richard carried me to the bedroom while muttering to himself. The Buddhist beads on his wrist were so hard that they hurt my waist. I struggled and protested. "No way. We just confirmed our relationship. This is too fast. Don't move. I'll just hug you and do nothing." On the soft and tidy big bed, Richard hugged me tightly and buried his head in my neck. The hot breath sprayed on the skin, causing a shiver. He kept his word and simply slept with me in his arms. When I woke up the next day, Richard was busy in the kitchen with a sky blue apron tied around his waist. His whole temperament changed from a business tycoon to a good family man. "We have Chinese and Western breakfasts. Which one do you like?" I was surprised. "Richard, you got into the role so quickly." Richard leaned over and gave me a kiss on the side of my face, like a dragonfly touching the water, and it was gone in an instant. "You'll have to get used to it soon, Andrew." "Oh." I was brushing my teeth and responded vaguely, with the corners of my mouth unconsciously curling up in a slight arc. I casually clicked on Weibo while eating, and saw a term suddenly appearing on the hot search list. Hashtag Richard and Rachel cancel their engagement hashtag. I almost choked on the soy milk in my mouth. You move too fast. Richard said as a matter of course, I won't let you be seen as an intruder by others. But is it really okay for you and my sister to cancel the engagement so hastily? This is a marriage between two families. Does my father agree? Richard chuckled, his raised eyebrows looking charming and wanton. Rachel and I never had any feelings for each other, not to mention that I gave her a piece of land in the west of the city, and she couldn't be more happy now. As for Mr. Gu, he is old and frail. The power of the Gu family is now in Rachel's hands. She can handle it. As if to confirm his statement, a message from Rachel popped up on WeChat. Well done, bro, 10 million has been deposited into your card. You too can enjoy it. My heart skipped a beat and I hurriedly opened my mobile banking app to check my balance. Ones, tens, hundreds, tens of millions. I finally became rich overnight. But the money is already in hand. Why should I risk sacrificing my health to get along with Richard? Although he is indeed very handsome and very much my type, there are thousands of handsome men in this world. Why should I hang myself on a tree? Moreover, he is the prince and I am an illegitimate child. With such a huge difference in status, who can guarantee that this so-called love will not be worn away by friction? In just a few minutes, Richard asked me expectantly if his sandwich was delicious, but my mind had already wandered in other directions without me noticing. It's delicious. Richard is not only proficient in Buddhism, but also has a talent for cooking. After breakfast, Richard went to work. He specifically asked his assistant to accompany me home to pack up my things, and we were excited to start our cohabitation life. I politely declined. Are you kidding? How can I run away if someone is following me? I immediately booked a flight to Iceland. Soak in hot springs, enjoy the aurora, and it would be even more perfect if you could have a romantic encounter with handsome European and American guys. I quickly packed my luggage, put on my hat and mask, and ran all the way to the airport. A wise man does not fall in love, and the king becomes rich overnight and goes abroad. I won't even look at the prince of the Beijing circle. I will kneel in front of the temple of the god of wealth and won't be able to get up. I'm going to run away with 10 million. I was cheering myself up with great excitement when I suddenly bumped into someone head-on. A few hours later, when I saw that familiar handsome face again, I covered my face and wished I could find a crack in the ground to crawl into. There was a chill between Richard's sharp brows, and the atmosphere around him was cold enough to freeze. Where are you going, Andrew? I pulled my mask up and said in a low voice, You got the wrong person, didn't you? The next moment, I was caught off guard and carried on Richard's shoulders. Whether you admit your mistake or not, you will know when you get home and take a look. His suit was neatly ironed, but his movements were rude and unreasonable. This was the first time Richard got so angry that he said something irrelevant in front of me since we met. There were people coming and going in the airport. He strode towards the exit, and his height and long legs were particularly eye-catching. I struggled violently. Fuck. We are both men, you are shameless, but I still want you, Richard. Put me down. Hey, you're not pretending anymore? Richard sneered, raised his hand and patted my butt. Behave yourself, I'll settle the score with you when we get back. I instantly felt hot from my face to my neck, and I felt like I was being cooked. Watch your paws. Someone looked over here curiously, and two girls passing by covered their mouths and laughed. Ah, the literature of robbery shines into reality. If they are not real, then I am fake. The little gong is wearing a string of Buddhist beads. A Buddhist breaks his vows for love. It's even more exciting. I hung my head and gave up resisting in despair. Richard rushed all the way to the Liu residence, ignoring the shocked expression of the nanny. He locked the bedroom door, bent over and threw me onto the bed, his angular face tense. He first took off his watch and then began to unbutton his suit. He kept a close eye on me during the process, fearing that I would run away again if I wasn't paying attention. Then, Richard came over with his upper body naked. I stared at him, refusing to admit defeat, and reached out to pull at them randomly, causing the dark brown Buddhist beads to shatter onto the ground. He picked one up casually and brought it close to me, his deep brows filled with coldness. Since you have deceived me, you must pay the price. Price? Is it? Is it what I thought? Realizing something was wrong, I finally panicked. Is it really okay for you to be so extravagant? Indulgence is bad for your health, Richard. Richard snorted disdainfully. You're afraid now? It's too late. As the distance got closer, Richard's eyes became redder and redder. At last, the arrogant and domineering prince bit my lips hard. Then he buried his head in my shoulder and cried. I was stunned for a moment. Why are you crying? His tears were like a flood, soaking the thin fabric of his summer shirt. David, this is the second time you've left me. David? Second time? Wait. My eyes widened suddenly, and I was horrified. I've had plastic surgery. How did you recognize me? No, when did you recognize me? Almost no one would believe it if I told them. The prince of Richard's family and David had a secret relationship in high school. Richard and I were desk mates. His parents died when he was young and he was raised by his grandfather, which made him taciturn and dull. But I am a chatterbox, careless and heartless every day. When Richard was confused and lacked confidence, he would often put his arm around his shoulders and say, "What are you afraid of? I will always support you." Whenever there was an exam, no matter whether it was a big one or a small one, I would drag Richard to the temple near the school to burn incense. The Buddha will bless us to get good grades in the exam. He didn't believe in these things. Come on, if you have time to be superstitious, you might as well do more real questions. I punched his chest with my fist. You are always a top student. You don't understand the pain of poor students. It's good to have some psychological comfort. Richard became more cheerful and smiley under my guidance. He said to me enviously many times, David, you look like a child who grew up in love. I smiled and neither admitted nor denied it. For more than 10 years, I have been used to covering up everything with a smile, including my identity as an illegitimate child and my messy family. I discovered that Richard's feelings for me went beyond those of a normal friend on a summer afternoon. Our seats were in the last row by the window. I had just finished a difficult math class and was lying on the table with my eyes closed to rest. A pleasant smell of laundry detergent approached, and Richard gave me a gentle kiss on the face. At that moment, all I could think of was, fuck, I treat you as a brother but you want me. But my ears still turned red uncontrollably. Richard noticed. He also leaned over the desk and whispered in my ear, David, I know you are not asleep. I like you. Do you want to date me? I blushed and scolded him, you're crazy. Two men talking about love is bullshit. Richard gently hooked his fingers around mine under the table. But you like me too, don't you? His voice was tinged with seduction. If you are worried, we can talk in secret. No one else will know. I struggled internally for a long time and finally opened my eyes. Okay. As soon as he finished speaking, an electronic beeping sound was heard. Richard blushed and raised his hand in front of me. My bracelet rang. It said my heartbeat was too fast. Although we are in love, our way of getting along is actually no different from before. Looking back, the most outrageous thing the two of them had ever done was probably that immature kiss. And on Richard's birthday, after much persuasion, I wrote him a love letter. In the second semester of senior year, Richard, as the future heir of the Liu family, started a 3-month secret training arranged by his grandfather. Before leaving, the boy drew a big heart on the love letter and returned it to me. There is nothing between us except this letter. In order to prevent you from forgetting me, I will leave it to you to remind you of me. I patted his shoulder and scolded him with a smile. You are still a dog. But I still did as he said and put the love letter in the compartment of my school bag. Later, the class reshuffled the seats and I sat at the same table with the famous, loud speaker in the class. When I was flipping through a book, the pink envelope fell to the ground, and she picked it up quickly. Wow, such a big heart. Let me take a good look at it for you. When she excitedly unfolded the letter and saw the huge words, "To arrogant Richard," at the beginning, she froze in disbelief. My face changed drastically and I snatched the love letter. Don't you have the courtesy to touch other people's things without their permission? But it was too late. This letter, which embodied the young love between two teenagers, became the fatal shackle that ruined my high school career. 7 years ago, people's minds were far less open than they are now, especially when it comes to homosexuality. Ever since the news that I liked Richard spread like wildfire, the whole grade was talking about it. When boys see me, they take a detour for fear of being noticed by me. Fuck, I'm going to throw up. No wonder David looks so effeminate. It turns out he doesn't like women at all. Richard treats him as a brother, but he actually wants to date him. If I were Richard, I would vomit right there and then. They all thought that I had a one-sided crush on Richard, and the rumors were like poisoned arrows, shooting into my heart one by one. Fortunately, I thought silently. Fortunately, he was not affected. Later, the incident became so serious that the head teacher called my mother. After being beaten, put in solitary confinement and drugged, my mother picked up a fruit knife and cut my face into a bloody mess. I was forced to transfer schools. 7 years later, I changed my name and met Richard again with a face that had undergone successful plastic surgery. He is the high and mighty head of Richard's family, and I am just an illegitimate child with a notorious affair. The lesson from the past was still fresh in my mind, and I instinctively wanted to escape. If Rachel hadn't offered a high price of 10 million, we might have become two parallel lines, never intersecting. Richard's face in memory overlaps with the present. His tears flowed freely, and he complained while crying. I was just skeptical at first, but when you held my hand and taught me how to write, the familiar handwriting made me sure that Andrew was my David. I've been looking for you for 7 years, David. You call me a dog, but you're even more of a dog than me. After the game, the vest fell off completely. When I think about how Richard has been watching me trying so hard to seduce him these days like it was a circus, I want to bang my head against the wall. Fortunately, Richard was immersed in the emotion of regaining what he had lost and did not laugh at me. I have always felt guilty about what happened back then. I cannot receive any information from the outside world during the closed training. You can go to Richard's house to find my grandfather. Although he is a bit old-fashioned, he always respects my decisions and will definitely help you. The tall and handsome man seemed like the reincarnation of Lindayu. His muscular biceps were stained with tear marks, and he sobbed and complained bitterly. To tell you the truth, this was a trap set up by Rachel and I from the beginning. I bet you would be with me again for 10 million. I made the right bet, but I didn't expect you to turn against me after getting the money. He became more and more excited as he spoke, and his snot and tears were all over me. Damn it, I'm not as important as 10 million. Can't you play the long game and catch a bigger fish? How much money do you want to have a relationship with the man who is in charge of Richard's family? Stop. Your crying is so annoying. I keenly grasped the key information. Buddhist lecturer, breaking off the engagement? Was it all a trap set by you and Rachel? Yeah, Richard sniffed. How else can I get you to come out willingly? I gritted my teeth. Fine, Richard, you're fine. We're just getting started. Far from being afraid, Richard glared at me menacingly, with a dangerous light flashing in his eyes. Your punishment for running away with the money has not yet been implemented. 11. 20 minutes later. Hiss. A thin layer of sweat formed on my forehead. I was now leaning over the bedside table in dishevel, gritting my teeth. Come on, am I afraid of you? After a pause, he growled unwillingly. I am your teacher. Once a teacher, always a father. You are committing treason. Richard rolled his eyes inelegantly. Isn't it just a punishment for you to copy a Buddhist scripture? Why are you yelling and screaming as if I did something to you? He stared at the Buddhist beads dangling above my head without blinking. Hold it tightly, don't let it fall down. I didn't dare turn my head and could only glare at him sideways. How could he come up with the idea of copying Buddhist scriptures while holding the round Buddhist beads on his head? Richard laughed happily. What are you looking at your husband for? Bah, shame on you. Do you know why I believe in Buddhism? Richard suddenly stopped smiling and asked. I was also puzzled by this. Didn't you claim that you never believed in superstition? In the past, when we went to the temple to burn incense, you refused to worship. Because you believe it. Richard said in a very light voice. If praying to Buddha and copying a few Buddhist scriptures can allow me to meet you again, even if there is a 1 in 10,000 chance, I would like to try it. I was silent for a moment. I don't believe it. Unless you immediately stop punishing me by making me copy Buddhist scriptures. Richard immediately got angry. Pay attention, David. I'm going to teach you a lesson. After an hour of hard work, I was tense all over and sweating profusely, but I finally finished copying. Richard took out a ruler from nowhere and knocked on the table in a dignified manner. Will you run away next time, David? I won't run away, I said sincerely. Well, Richard nodded with satisfaction, things are different now. No one can stop us from being together openly. I was still terrified. Are you really not afraid of worldly rumors? Hey, I'm the prince of Richard's family. Who dares to tell me and my boyfriend what to do? I hesitated. Maybe it's because of what I've experienced. I'm traumatized. Wait a moment. Richard held his chin and thought for a moment, then took out his cell phone and started typing. 10 minutes later, he raised his chin proudly and said, "Okay, let's check Weibo." I clicked on his homepage with some doubt. I accidentally lost you 7 years ago, but fortunately we finally met again after many twists and turns. You are the one I want to be with even if I have to fight against the whole world, and this time, I will never leave you alone to face all the rumors. I like you, regardless of gender, I only like you. Posted a minute ago. My personal privacy was not disclosed, but Richard said everything that needed to be said. My eyes gradually became hot. Richard stretched out his slender hand in front of me. David, let's make peace. Damn, I feel like crying. What's going on? Hold on, David. Why are you crying? I blinked my red eyes and raised my hand, placing it heavily on his dry palm. He held it tightly. Okay. I agreed in a hoarse voice. Rachel Extra. Children born into wealthy families know the principle of survival of the fittest from an early age. My father, Adams, favors boys over girls and prefers my 2 good-for-nothing younger brothers. I studied very hard and took various special classes, trying to make him realize that girls are not just tools for marriage. But it was in vain. At a family dinner 3 years ago, I noticed Andrew in the corner at first sight. He has delicate features and a face like a pretty girl. He sat there quietly drinking and eating dessert, as if he was not interested in the occasion at all. During the dinner, my father tried to bring him together with the daughter of the Zhao family in order to achieve cooperation between the 2 families. Andrew smiled, but the words he said were like thunder exploding in his ears. Dad, I like men. I've been in a relationship with a boy since high school. From then on, I knew that although he looked quiet and gentle, he was just as rebellious as I was. My relationship with my 2 younger brothers was terrible, but I became closer and closer to Andrew. Richard was dissatisfied with our engagement and offered to trade the land in the west of the city with me. I pretended to agree, but in fact I had told Andrew the whole truth that night in the bar. Although I am cold-blooded and profit-driven, I truly regard Andrew as a family member. I don't even bother to use my relatives to achieve my own interests. Then I found out that my fiancé, whom I had only met a few times, had actually had a secret relationship with my younger brother. Richard thought he was setting a trap for Andrew, but it was actually the opposite. Andrew took advantage of the situation and gradually tested Richard's feelings. First, he took him to meet his mother and then invited him to attend Adam's birthday party. He is taking Richard into his world. To make up for the regret in his senior year of high school when Richard knew nothing about him and later he had no way of finding out when he left. As for him running away with 10 million? Of course, I don't really want to escape from Richard. Just a couple's trick. After all, Andrew is a cunning big shot.